Oh, it's all real. It's all real. So hello, everyone. My name is Annissa George. Thanks for joining us Facebook Live. Today's conversation is part of my Listen and Learn series, where I join community members on Facebook Live to bring awareness around their work, their experiences, and the issues most important to them. I believe the best way to find solutions to our most pressing issues here in the city of Boston is by making sure that everyone has an opportunity to share. If you have organizations or guests or topics you'd recommend for this broadcast, please email me at Annissa at AnnissaForBoston.com. For today's discussion, I'm excited to host a Listen and Learn roundtable with some of my former students. I'm really super excited to have Nicole and Drew with us. Drew is, I think, from my very first year teaching, and Nicole's from somewhere in the middle. I'm grateful that they've been able to join me and to share a little bit about their stories. And we've got John DeSantos here too. Oh, that's so exciting. As I was reading my script.
How you doing?
How exciting is this? And I'm just thrilled to have the three of you with me today. And I know we were trying to get Martha Galdeman. Nicole probably remembers Martha from softball.
We were in the same class.
Wait, 1 second. I'm actually on a terrible Wi-Fi in the switch over quickly. Oh my goodness.
What's good, Jay?
What's good, Drew, man?
Same old thing, man.
Long time.
All right, so I think that I'm back. I think that we're all back. There was a little bit of technical difficulty there. I should have double checked that. The three of you, I think you've met my boys over the years, and we've really tried hard to have the internet service working in the house, and I was hooked up to the wrong one. But Drew, John, Nicole, I'm so grateful to have the three of you with me to talk about your lives since graduating from East Boston High School. We could talk about Eastie. We could talk about sort of your experiences at East Boston High, your experiences since then, but also as concerned citizens, concerned residents here in the city of Boston. What are the things that we need to be doing to support you during this time, and maybe reflecting back on some of those years at Eastie, but certainly on how you've been since then. I've sort of interacted with you in different situations over the years. Drew, who's with Tiana, another former student. Tiana may reach in and say hi in a little bit. Check in with the two of you, and you have a beautiful family. Nicole, I've had the pleasure of seeing as she's still pretty engaged in things in East Boston, and I'm looking forward to a new leg of her journey and her future. And John, a couple of years back, I was at City Hall, and I think you turned around, John, was like, I know that voice. And John was doing some work at City Hall for another outside company, and just so happy to see your faces. It makes me feel like I'm 15 years younger, but none of us are. So, Drew, I'm going to start with you. If you want to just introduce yourself, you can remind us maybe the year you graduated from East Boston High. Give us a memory, and let's talk about where you are now.
Well, my name is Drew Jameson. I graduated from East Boston High in 2003. Now I work for Mass Water here in Boston. I have 4 children. I'm also an autism dad, very big advocate for autism. For the most part, some of my greatest memories was just the melting pot of people that we were around back in high school. East Boston High is known for a big ethnicity back, like tons of different types of people. So you got to be friends and shake hands and rub shoulders with a lot of different people from different places. So I would say, that's probably one of my biggest fun memories, besides playing football, which is something I love to do anyway.
You're not still playing football, are you?
No. One too many surgeries and I'm all done.
Yeah. Well, you have to start coaching soon.
Yes.
I love it. Nicole, tell us a little bit introduce yourself to those that are tuning in today, a little bit of reflection back, and tell us what you're up to.
So my name is Nicole McCormick. I graduated East Boston High School in 2007. So it's kind of hard to believe it's been 14 years already. I still live in East Boston, work in East Boston. Some of my fondest memories at the high school were just like I played 3 sports, soccer, basketball, and softball, and there was an amazing sense of community among the students, the student athletes, the teachers. It always felt like there was somebody you could go to if you needed anything. So I'll always look back on that with just like great happiness and memories. I worked at the Boys and Girls Club in East Boston for many years, so I'm super passionate about youth involvement, youth engagement, connecting youth in the city to quality resources and experiences, and it's still really important to me now. So I look forward to seeing what we can do.
Great. And if I could just share a little bit of something you're thinking about doing, which always excites me. Nicole, you want to tell us what your next career is that you're exploring?
Yeah, so teaching. I love the little guys, so hopefully in the next year or two, I have my own kindergarten classroom. And it's really exciting. I was at the Boys and Girls Club for many years, so it was a little scary to transition out of that. But my heart's always been with kids, so it still feels the same in that way.
I love it. I'm excited for you and for your future. John, tell us, what year did you graduate? You were 03 as well?
Yeah, I was an 03 kid. Yep.
That's my first class. I love it.
Right. There you go. So my name's John Dos Santos. Like we just talked about, I graduated 2003. The thing I liked about my high school experience was kind of how Drew touched up. It was almost like a brotherhood and sisterhood up there. I mean, we got taken in by East Boston residents like we were one of their own. I mean, I remember being able to go to their house when they weren't even there. Their parents were there, you know, like just taking us in, like, and especially during these times to hear like everything that goes on outside and, you know, to be involved in that back then was great. So I'm an electrician right now. I've been an electrician for about 15 years, since, I don't know, probably 04, 05 in the union. And that's how I heard that magical voice I'll never forget in the hallway. And that's kind of my take on my high school experience.
No, it's great. And John, you talk about that sense of community. I think Nicole also and Drew sort of referenced the community that is East Boston High School. And John, you're reflecting on that. And I think, Drew, the case was the same for you. You came across the city to go to school at Boston High School, a citywide school, well-known both for academics and athletics. And I'm really proud to have been a part as a teacher for 13 years in that community that was created at East Boston High School that exists still today. I continue to try my best to stay connected to the school and meet kids that are there now. And that sort of that culture, that, you know, that Eastie pride, class pride and tradition that exists there is still there today. I am one of a friend of mine had pulled together some more recent graduates. I think Nicole actually tuned in to that call with some graduates over the last few years. Most of them are still very much connected to the East Boston community. And one of the things that we talked about was your desire or their desire to stay and remain here in the city of Boston. And you know, we're having this conversation today as your former students of mine, but you're also residents and constituents of mine now in a very different way. So, you know, Drew, we're going to start with you. You mentioned in your remarks that you're an autism dad. You have a child that has autism diagnosis. And I know that you and Tiana do a lot of work around awareness and support. You want to tell us a little bit about that experience and how we can have better supports in place to support you and support your family?
I would say when it comes to learning and understanding the autism spectrum, it's so wide. We've been blessed to have some great people help us. We have teachers right now that are really well-rounded in it. But I would say when it comes to the stigma around autism, I think if it could just be explained probably better throughout the city, where maybe it's just not a autism walk, but maybe like a autism day throughout Boston. More explanation of it may not just be nonverbal, like my Noah is. He's nonverbal. He does everything else. If you told him no, he says he stops. If you say go, he runs. You know, he does everything. He just won't reply to you. Then you have other situations where autism may be a sensory disorder where they don't like certain things touching their skin. So the stigma kind of puts it in one kind of focus, but there's so many different signs and different ways of autism and what it is. I had a stutter growing up. The stigma wasn't on me, but I could have been autistic growing up as a kid. I've overcome it. But those are some of I would think the best thing that we could do around that is work on the stigma of autism, because there's so many different, the spectrum is huge. It's really big.
Yeah, no, and is Noah in the Boston Public Schools? I should have asked this before we came on. Does Noah go to BPS?
Yes, he goes to the Trotter. Yes.
Great. And do you want to talk a little bit about some of the support services that are available to Noah, and maybe a little bit of what might be missing?
Yes. The support systems we had growing up with Noah. He found out he was about 2 years old when we found out. We had counselors coming to the home at first, where they would sit down with him for an hour. It was pretty rigorous, about an hour every day for a 2-year-old, and they would work with him on different sensory things and pointing out colors and pointing out, understanding working on sign language. Now at the Trotter, he's in the special needs, so they have him going 4 days a week. Wednesdays they're home with the whole COVID situation. And what I do really appreciate is the teachers really, really, really intensify what they're doing when they're in the classroom one-on-one. They really treat them like they're one of their own. They don't expect less. They don't treat him any less. They expect him to learn it just as if it was me or you. And I really appreciate that, because that's something that we really preach in our home, even to my family members. Do not treat Noah any different, because he understands. He may not reply, but he does understand.
No, I love that.
Yeah,
and I want to give a special shout out to the school principal at the Trotter, as a high school classmate of mine.
Oh, cool.
Miss Serena Thomas. I went to high school with her. So it's glad to have such a great report about Noah and his work at the Trotter. Nicole, you had joined us for that meeting a couple of weeks back. And something that has sat with me since that meeting, and something that we've been talking about sort of internally about the work that we really need to focus more on as a city, has been that youth engagement. You talked in your opening remarks about how your heart is with the babies. Can you talk a little bit about the need to better engage our youth across all ages in different activities and different ways that we should be engaging them?
Yeah, so I think that if you're like me and you're third generation East Bostonian, it's really easy to connect to the local athletic leagues or the youth leadership programs or any of the community activities that are going on, because your parents are familiar with what is available to you in the community. But it's not always that easy for students, young people who are first generation, who may have some language barriers, but also outreach. There could be really great partnerships forged with schools, because schools host children, and there could be a great connection there to help kids just get involved, run around, join music, join art. East Boston has some awesome community centers, great youth advocates, and not all the time do those organizations have the opportunity to talk with each other. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if I'm up at the Boys and Girls Club and I know baseball or softball is hosting signups, I know that information, but, somebody who doesn't go to the Boys and Girls Club might not necessarily know that signups are taking place, or there's free programs going on at the parks in the city. And so I think that those organizations could talk a little more with each other and all know about what's going on. That way we can spread the word and just engage kids, especially now with everybody being in the house over the last year. We know how important it is for kids to just socialize and be able to run around and burn some energy off, and to not have that really is having an impact on their mental health, on their physical health, on their social well-being. And so it's really important now, as we sort of get on the tail end of this coronavirus.
Yeah, fingers crossed that we're arriving at that point. I do hope so. And John, you talked about your work as an electrician and being in the union. Can you talk a little bit about when you left high school and how you picked that field, how you picked that career, and what that's meant to you over these years?
So when I left in 03, I guess dabbled with college. Went to Bridgewater State. It wasn't for me. I was pretty clear early on. So I kind of got a job actually driving a company truck for an electrical contractor, which ended up working out. So my father was scared of electricity. That's probably the only thing he's ever been scared of in his life. So, my father's a tough guy. So he, to see him frightened of something, I was like, oh, hold on. I gotta invest in this. I gotta see what's going on. If he's scared of this, then there's something going on here. And that's honest to this day. He's still petrified of it. But I got into that, and I'll tell you what, it's probably been the best move I could have made for my career and my life. I've met so many people, good people, obviously. I'm in a union. I've taken classes. I actually have my master's license in electrical. And it's just to see a kid like me, kind of grow up through the city, and it's tough. It's a tough spot to grow up in. I mean, I'm in Dorchester. You hear violence all day long, and the sirens don't stop. So, to come out and basically have a great, just a great opportunity to be an electrician it's a story to tell. And to relate to other kids looking to grow up in the city and feel like they're not stuck.
Yeah, no, it's a great story to tell. And so you're a master's level electrician, but did you tell me, and you'll have to educate me a little bit on this, did you say you were like a high voltage specialist? Is that when we had our last conversation, you were telling me something about that?
No, not a high voltage specialist. I mean, we kind of dabble with it all, though.
Okay.
To be honest with you. I'm not out there doing necessarily what NSTAR does. I'm more in-house, but we do deal with high voltage in-house. We just don't go up to like 13.8 and, anything crazy above that, so.
And do you want to give a shout out to the company that you work for? Because it sounds like they really created an opportunity for you.
Yeah, it's Local 103. So
yeah, because you're a local union. That's great.
Yeah. So
and have you been with the same company all along?
Yeah, for about 9 years.
That's great.
9 years. Yeah, JF White Electrical.
Excellent.
Yeah, they've been great. I've had a fantastic run with them, and I'm still there, obviously. So I seem to be a good fit.
No, that's good. I love that you were motivated by your father's fear. I've probably never shared this with the three of you, but I fell in love with government and politics as a high school student myself when I was at Boston Tech, which is now the O'Brien. And I remember as a teenager telling my dad that I loved Boston politics. And he said to me very specifically, and I've told this story a lot now that I'm running for mayor, but he said to me, a girl with an Arab name in this city will never win anything. You'll never be able to run anything in this office, in this city, because that was his experience as an Arab man in this city. So he was really anxious for his teenage daughter to, set some ambition on potentially running for office someday. But it is sort of funny how your dad's fear of electricity motivated you, I think, in some way. You had to go find out about this. Because I often say, there's two reasons I ran for office. One, because I knew I'd do a good job and there's some really important work that people aren't focused on. But two, I'd really like to prove my father wrong that I could do it. So it was good to hear that. I never knew that about you, and that's pretty neat. But as a city councilor, I represent all of you, and I'm proud to represent all of you as an at-large councilor. You know that I'm now running for mayor, and I'm thinking about the work that is undone. As city residents, what are the things that you want your city government to respond to do different, to do in a different way, to do better. I call it reimagining some of how we're doing the work in the city. Drew, I'll start with you. What are the things that you want from me, both as your city councilor today and hopefully as your mayor in the fall?
I would probably look forward to bringing that community feel across Boston back, the way we talked about East Boston High, bringing that community feel where we had the BNBL as kids growing up. We had red shirts that we called it years ago. We had the block parties that Boston would throw. All those kind of things to kind of bring that feel back. Only because, as Nicole mentioned, I think we're losing the youth with the fact that they can't get out and rub shoulders with each other. They're doing more of the internet, instant gratification. Everybody gets a trophy, even last place type thing. And we got to getting back to those core ideals, the morals, treating each other accordingly, the way you want to be treated. Learning to be a teammate. It's not an individual game all the time. All those things. I think if I could hope for anything, it'd be getting that community feel back in Boston.
I love it.
Yeah.
Nicole, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I have to add on to what Drew is saying. The city does a great job at connecting, teens with jobs during the summer. And I think that's that can be part of the challenge too, with engaging young people with community experiences because they have to go to work, right? And so how do we connect all of those things? How do we connect the young person with the school, with local job opportunities, with businesses, with community organizations, and really make them feel like they're contributing to their neighborhood, and they can just go to their youth center or go to their part-time job after school and see a friend and feel respected for the work that they're doing. But other than that, I would love to be able to continue living in the neighborhood. And I know this is something we mentioned last time we spoke about. This may not be a city that's affordable for a young person, especially in my age group. The city is changing rapidly. There's a ton of development in every pocket of the neighborhood, not only here in East Boston, but everywhere you drive, you see it. And just to be able to have affordable housing and opportunities to own a home in the city, because that's your dream, right? To be able to raise a family in the city that you grew up in and have them take advantage of Boston Public Schools, of all the community things, and just being a city kid. It's a privilege to be a city kid and grow up here. And so that's definitely something I'm concerned about as well.
Yeah, no, housing for sure is a really important aspect to living that city life. If you can't afford to stay, how do you? And we talk about community, we talk about sort of the joy that we have growing up in the city that we've all shared, both in our times in East Boston, but also in our own personal lives. And we want to share that with our kids.
Mm-hmm.
We want to continue to live those experiences. John, what would you say, that government needs to continue to do or do different?
I'm a big advocate for racial, the racial stigmatisms that go on out there. So for me, it's bringing that community like we had in Eastie. Like there's no shortcut there. Like, I can't make it up. I mean, just for me to come from the city to go to a heavy populated Italian basically city, a town and just to be welcomed, it just changed my whole life. It changed my whole dynamic on how I would look at people.
Mm-hmm.
And just to know, like, hey, these, everybody is the same. Like we're all a human race, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, that's more important that everybody, especially the kids of this generation, understand that, and it's big. I think that right there in itself, it just it'll go far and beyond, and it'll just get the stigmatism out of here eventually, with just the racial inequalities that we've gone through in the past. So I think for me, and not that I'm selling anything short about the crisis in the money that lives in this, or the money that you would need to live in a city. But that racism factor there is huge because it's still relevant.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate this idea that there's no shortcut to it, that it does take very intentional work, very deliberate work, very thoughtful efforts to do that. And, I appreciate this idea that you always felt so welcome coming to East Boston. But we still know that there are so many instances across our city, across our society, where different races don't feel welcome, don't feel that they can access the school, never mind all of the other parts of what it means to live a good life and all of that. So I think that that's a really important note to make. And we want a city, we know about systemic racism. We know that it exists in all components of our society, all components of our life. And so once we acknowledge that, right? And I think for the most part, there are still people that don't acknowledge it, and that's very unfortunate and very blind and ignorant. I think that is the definition of ignorance. So we need to now get to that next step. So what are those missing components? What are the things that we need to do to break those, break down those systems, or to fix the parts of the system that are broken? Because there are some really good parts of the system.
Right.
And I think we were able to demonstrate that in East Boston, that things could, that we could come together in ways that were really very special. And I think that it had to do with the really nice, I used this word earlier today in another forum, but I think it's the best description. It's like this nexus, sort of where things of maybe slightly different interests come together. When they are able to come together, you create that culture that is welcoming. You create that community that is accepting and engaging. And that's when we have opportunities for everyone to thrive, right? And so that's the work. That's the work that we need to be doing. Certainly as a city. I want to go back. I forget now if it was Nicole or maybe Drew that mentioned this, but we talked about it's not individual sport. I think it was Drew talking about that. I often have said to my boys, if they don't want to engage in something, my phrase has always been, I'm not raising spectators. This is like, you got to get up off the bench and you have to play your part. You have to play your part. And you may not be the all-star. And Nicole was an all-star in her sports and academically. Drew was an all-star, both academically and athletically. And John was an all-star athletically and academically. And you got to do your part. You've got to play your role in whatever that team is, and whether that's at home with the family, whether that's in the workplace, but also when it's in the community. We've got to make sure that those broken pieces are pulled back together and that we're engaged in that work in our community. So this is a lot of fun to have such a serious and reflective conversation with the three of you. So let's talk a little bit about where we maybe failed any of you when we think back to schooling. When you think back to your high school experience, specifically to Eastie, not calling anyone out in particular, and then what were those components that we really succeeded? Because I want to learn, again, as an elected, as someone who wants to be a better policymaker, a better legislator, a better elected, I want to make sure that we're doubling down in the places and the parts that most impacted their lives positively, and like reassessing the parts that didn't work. And I'm reflecting on a moment, John. I spent a lot of time watching you play basketball, and I was good friends with your basketball coaches over the years. And when my oldest Douglas was born, I needed something to do, so I used to come and film your game. So I really spent some time watching, and I poked my head in during practice and stuff like that. And I remember I think it was Coach Rubin probably at the time, working with you on your effort under the net. I'm not a basketball player, but he just worked with you over and over and over again. And to me, that was a very positive relationship. And I'm just sort of thinking about now, reflecting on those almost 18 years ago now that you guys were in high school. But so talk to me about those parts that worked really well, like Coach Rubin, just working with you one-on-one, and some of those other parts that didn't work so well.
So first off, it was last year, right? We're just gonna go off and say that instead of 18 years ago.
Yeah.
No, video.
So, yeah, I mean, Coach Ruben was great. I mean, I just remember, like you said, he took his time. He showed me it was more post-up and the rebounding that I didn't quite like get his thought process on it, because I always had my own way of playing street ball, and street ball isn't, it isn't organized ball, right? So Coach Ruben definitely, he was on me in a positive way, right? So that taught me just about accepting criticism. Because you think you know everything as a young kid, and you're out there, and then you find out that no, you don't. Oh, look at his way. He's got a better way, a better strategy, and it helped. I mean, I became a good rebounder because of Coach Rube, and my low post game was ended up materializing, so it was good. As far as maybe the points of that, not you guys failed us, is probably the electives, I would say. I just hear of kids from like Newton, and not to compare just Newton South,
Yeah.
Newton North, or any other school to us, because obviously we are our own entity, but they had more electives. They had great electives. I mean, they had sociology, I believe. They had woodworking. They just had things of that sort to really bring a different scope of school in there. Like you could have and I'm a firm believer in this. I don't think kids should just have kids, right? So I think there should be a prep course in high school to let you know how to raise kids. You know what I'm saying? Like a kid can't just have a kid without knowing at least some aspect of what it takes to raise a kid. So I think those type of electives, and just anything from hands-on approach electives, psychology electives, things of that sort. I think we had the languages, right? We had Italian, we had Spanish, and I believe there was Nifty, and I can't think.
Nifty, National
Nifty.
Entrepreneurship, my class.
Right. And we had another, I thought, healthcare. Or
yeah, we had the health professions. Yep.
Health professions. There you go.
Awesome.
Sorry, see, I guess it is 18 years.
It was 18 years ago, John.
What was it? So, if we could just give every kid, the same type of curriculum base, would be great, and that forms unity as well. That helps just bridge that gap, in a different sense of everything's not stringent on education. You can kind of dabble, in different fields of it, I guess.
I appreciate that. I can hear all the family noise in the background. I love it. It's not just my house that's loud and loud sometimes. I do a pre-announcement before I do a Facebook Live. That's quiet in the house. I love it. Nicole, tell us a little bit about some of those successes, and then some, what worked. Tell us about what worked and sort of what didn't, how we could fix any of those breaks in the system.
Well, I think for me anyway, there was always a sense of you felt like someone at the high school had your back. And I think everybody had that person. And then you didn't have to be an athlete or be engaged in an extracurricular to have a go-to person. It could have been a teacher that you connected with. And it always felt like, whenever I would even come to you or Coach Elliott, it just felt like I was respected. And there really was that just trust that I personally had with some of the staff members. And like, God rest his soul, Anthony Albano, there was just always somebody that you just felt, took you seriously, didn't think of you as just a kid, and took a minute to just make sure that you were good and felt okay. I think back to senior year, and this is probably touching on to John's point a little bit, because I have a brother in the union. I have family members in the union, and he wouldn't have done well in college at all. And I think that having the option, or at least knowing that, technical professions are an option is like a great thing. But for me personally, I returned to school as an adult after a short bid at a private college right out of high school. And I wish that somebody talked to me about this. Like, so when I returned to school, I went to North Shore Community College. And I don't think that we talked to the kids enough. Like, nobody told me, like, community colleges are so affordable. You can work full time and there's so much flexibility with classes, and you can do the mass transfer program and like have really great tuition rates. And, you know, that stigma, I think, of like community college, like it sometimes I think discourages kids from, you know, exploring that option. But for me, I had a great experience with that, and then eventually transferred into a state school. But I wish that, you know, I was first generation college, so my parents didn't have the experience with financial aid and like planning for paying for school and all of that. And so for me, those are all things I sort of figured it out along the way. And I think that that's where I wish I learned a little bit more about, you know, because when you graduate school, you're like, I'm going to college, but you never really think long game. You think, how am I? And, you know, now it's a blessing in disguise, because I think, well, geez, if I stayed at that private school, I would be in such a different financial situation in terms of student debt. And, you know, at the time it was scary, but now I look back and I think, thank God, you know, because it would really be different. So I think for me, it would just be having that conversation about what more affordable options for post high school would be.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that you and the relationship you have with a lot of the young people that you work with, and I've watched that through the years, especially since graduation. I hope that you are, and I suspect that you are educating the young people with those experiences, taking away some of that stigma around community college as a great, not just alternative, but another path. Like, we don't all follow the same path, and you've got to think about what would work best for you. So, and I imagine that you're doing that with the young people you work with and have worked with.
Yeah, and you know, when I was at Eastie Gear Up, I'm not sure if they're still there, the Gear Up program, but they helped me incredibly. They took care of all of the sort of the paperwork that went along with it and the applications and things like that. They were awesome. But yeah, and anytime I see like teens in the community, I say it's such a great option.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that they have you. It's really good. Are you doing any coaching still in the summer with East Boston softball?
I was for a few years, and then I was going to school at night. So between working and going to school, it was just a lot. But yeah, hopefully that the league can come back this summer, and you know, all of the youth activities can get back and going.
I know. Well, Drew, I know, I remember very clearly from your times at East Boston High, again, especially because you and John were in my first class, and as a new, I'll never forget that first group of students, but I remember how much you loved football. I remember that very clearly. And now that I've got my own football players in my house, especially my oldest, who's doing a little fancy QBing for high school.
Nice.
I think about you more because I remember how just passionate you were about sports. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about, and this applies to whether it's athletics or any sort of extra stuff, like, you know, I think Nicole was like sort of referred to like having adults and caring adults in a building, but also having things that drew you into school as keeping you motivated, I think, to attend school. Tell me about your experience with athletics and football in particular.
You know, football for me, and I think it's funny because me and Tiana, my wife, have this conversation all the time, where, you know, you hear about the stigma of, you know, the head injuries now, the concussion, the CTE.
I think about it all the time. I think about it all the time, Drew.
And I think you can relate as a parent. If that passion, like the passion you had to be a politician, or the passion John had to be an electrician, or the passion Nicole has to be a teacher, you cannot deny that child with that passion. The passion I had for football, and still do, it kept me in school. It kept me getting the grades right. Because I knew my mom made it very clear, my dad made it very clear, without the books, you won't play ball. And it was cut and dry. And understanding that, and understanding the passion I had for the game, I would work just as hard as I do playing football at making sure that my grades were right. And I find that for parents, you have to kind of understand and kind of tap into what the passion is. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and this girl is a actor without knowing she's an actor. She can cry on sight. She loves to sing. She has this grown person energy, and all I can do is keep putting her in that position. If there's an audition for little kids, she'll be there. Whether she gets it or not, it'll just keep that passion that she has. And it's all natural. It's all natural passion. My 6-year-old, he's a gamer. If that's something he's into, and like Nicole mentioned, it's not always the 4-year university. It could be a trade. I have a 17-year-old, great high school student. He's thinking trade. There's nothing wrong with trades. Trades are something that are always going to be around. They'll always make you a living. Will you be able to live here in Boston? I don't know. But that's the situation.
That's what we're trying to fix.
Yeah. But I would say that passion. If they have that passion, and then, like I tell a lot of my friends that are parents, as a parent, you may not have the leash on, but as long as you got the harness on, as long as you have a harness on them and you can kind of guide them left or right, I think you'll be fine. But tap into that passion.
That is very wise and mature. And again, it's hard for me to picture the three of you not as kids, because you're young and obviously very mature, very thoughtful and considerate adults now. And so that's very wise of you. I like getting rid of the leash. But the head concussions, the injury piece is very, very real.
Yes, I've had a couple surgeries since. They do ache, but again, it's kind of like when you stepped into politician, you had your bumps and bruises.
Yep.
There were some things you had to learn on the fly. It comes with the territory type of thing. Right. You look at Tom Brady, he's smiling. He got pretty wasted the other day, but it comes with the, you know what I mean? That was years of doing that. It's just one of those, like I said, it's one of those passions.
Yeah.
Like for all of us here, we have a passion for what we do. That's why we're here talking.
Right.
When you have that passion, like your son's, he's a quarterback. I know he has passion. You can't play quarterback without having passion. It's just, it goes hand in hand. You have to be a leader. You have to love the game. You have to want to be great. You have to make other people around you great. That's just how that position is played. As an electrician, you cannot go in there playing peanut butter jelly with the electricity. You'll get hurt.
And John's dad will tell him that.
Right.
I don't do electricity, John. Yeah. I refuse.
Listen, Drew, you make me want to go put the pads on right now, man. You want to run a route?
Well,
that's what passion. I should have pulled up
some passion, man. It's passion. Like my boys right now, they're not showing any passion for sports. But I was a late guy. I didn't show my passion until about 8 years old. But when it clicked. That was it. There was no going back. Like it didn't matter. It didn't matter.
Well, and it doesn't have to be the sports. It can be, I've got, my kids are still engaged in athletics in different ways. But I do it. One of them is actually very much into the video game thing. And I knew I'm concerned about the time on this, especially with school being virtual. But you have to think like, all right, well, how can you engage in this in a different way to fulfill your passion? Because very few people can literally play video games for the rest of their life and feed a family off of that. So what's another way around that? I got one kid that's really into the NASCAR right now, which I think that's because when everything shut down, one of the first things to come back was racing.
There you go.
So when you think about live sports, they love that.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, no, but so that came back. I'm like, all right, well, maybe you should look at, I don't know, and car engineering or car design. I have no idea. But yeah, you do have to tap into people's passions. And we have to do that, especially when we think about our school system. It's the academics, but it's also these other opportunities to tap into your passion. And I'd say for the three of you, you were all very bright, academically capable students, but you also engaged in school, I think, if my recollection serves me well or right, that it was also these other components of your lives or your school lives that really engaged you. And I'd say that's true.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So can I just chime in?
Please.
I think Drew hit it right on the head there. The passion is a great bribing mechanism for parents. I do it all the time. It's a great bribe. I mean, how can you not? You know, it just makes it makes like a reward so much better for a kid, right? I mean, so I attest to that.
So John, remind me what you've got for children.
I just have one 4-year-old.
4.
Which she's probably about to run in here in a second. She was on my lap earlier.
Oh, no kidding. You have to put her on camera if you don't mind, if she does come back in.
You want me to put her on camera?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Boo Boo.
Oh, there we go.
Boo Boo.
Boo Boo. There she goes.
Now she's embarrassed.
Oh my God, look at her.
Hi, sweetie.
Hi, baby girl. Hi. Oh my God, I love her. Hi, baby girl.
She's gonna be tall like Daddy.
Yeah, she is pretty tall.
I love her. I love her.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so let's talk about kids. When we think about what we dream about for our children, what we hope for our kids, what's the future that you want for them? John, what's the future you want for your baby girl?
I would love for my daughter to grow up in a society where she. Here we go.
There we go.
She would grow up in a society where she can be comfortable in her skin.
I love it.
I would love for her education to take flight with no stigmatisms behind it. I would love for her to she's very kind. We teach her to be kind. We teach her not to be hurtful to people. We teach her to treat others as you want to be treated. She's done a great job. She's very vocal. She'll tell you exactly what she wants.
Like that girl.
Right. And just to be kind to others and love others. I mean, that's a huge thing that I don't know where that ever got lost. I know it's tough in the city to really take that on in stride because of just so much hatred, it seems like. And growing up in different parts, hey, you're from this part, you can't talk to these people, and you know, just the regular street values, I guess, that we all live by at some point, which need to be broken.
Right.
Because those are non-existent. They should be. Kids are different now.
Right.
If we can break those and understand those and just live a life of fulfillment and happiness, really. I mean, that's all that matters. Like, nobody wants their kid to be scared to go outside and play.
Right.
There's no reason for that, you know? And that's what I struggle with, and that's what I'm happier now with, I guess, is that I'm teaching her, you know, trying to set an example where my example was kind of a little different, you know? So I just want to, I just love for her to grow up in a society where she feels safe and comfortable in her skin.
I just came from a meeting before I logged into this meeting. There was a conversation around happiness, but to be happy is momentary, is sort of a momentary experience. What they were talking about is how do you find joy? How do you that like last longer? But I really love the conversation around love, and I happen to have on my table here one of my most favorite masks because this is the world we're living in right now. And it says, which I love most, is that love lasts longer.
That's beautiful.
I feel like it does. Like, and it, you know, it's a little silly and maybe a little corny, but I think this idea that you're teaching your daughter about love and about kindness and finding happiness and joy, that's raising a great kid. Like, and how I'm so proud of you and so excited for her. And
thank you.
You've got a beautiful daughter. She's obviously physically beautiful, but if you're teaching her those things, she's going to be inside of her heart and her soul a beautiful person.
Yeah,
that's really pretty cool. I love it. And we will maybe get her into Nicole's classroom.
Hey, Nicole, I'm not going to lie.
I love that.
My mother's a teacher, so you got
very good.
She's all set. Yep.
It's all good.
It's all good. Well, I mean, obviously education is what has connected us to each other.
Yes.
So as we prepare to wrap up in our conversation today, I'm going to start with you, Nicole. And a little bit about Nicole and my connection. Obviously, I was her classroom teacher, but before I had her in the classrooms and taught the upper grades, Nicole played softball for me at the high school, and then volunteered as a, I think I probably helped you more coaching. I think you were one of the coaches that we worked as a team with the young kids in the summertime, and I was the adult. Nicole was one of the young kids that said, Mrs. Tybee, or whatever you called me, Miss or Tybee. We want to coach a team, but we need an adult to also be there. And so I was the adult. But you all, and through my work, especially in the summer program, coaching in the summer in East Boston with the little ones, taught me a lot about some of the challenges growing up in East Boston. And John referenced some of the challenges growing up in Dorchester, where I live, and John and I aren't too far from each other here. But Nicole, coaching with you in the summertime, I remember being up at Constitution Beach. We use that practice field there, and realizing some of the impacts that East Boston feels, in particular, thinking about the airport. We practiced for a couple of hours with a great group of kids, trying to be physically active and engaged and all that sort of stuff, and just all day long looking at the ass end of the airplanes and just watch it, and thinking, oh, and this is why East Boston has such high rates of asthma. This is why we're dealing with things like noise pollution. And
why you miss a whole scene of your show when you're watching it, and you have to rewind and see what did they say, because it's so loud.
Because it's so loud. And the day I announced that I was running for mayor, I did it in front of the high school, and how quickly I forgot I've been out of East Boston, although I'm there all the time for so many years. But during my announcement, I was like, oh, shoot, I forget that the planes go right overhead. I've got to take these pauses while I'm speaking. But Nicole, tell me about, what advice do you give me as a city leader, as someone who wants to lead the city, be the leader for the city soon? What advice do you give me as we wrap up today?
I think just don't lose communication with the boots on the ground. The people that are on the ground working with the community every day, not just the people that, do important work in the office. It's the people who are, cleaning up the beaches, cleaning up the parks, working hands-on with the kids. Just those are the people that really have a true perspective as to what is needed, like on the day-to-day grind in the community, and just being accessible to those people would be huge, because sometimes it feels like you have something to say, you have a question, and it feels like you're sort of out of touch with the leaders, the political leaders in the community. And, do they really care? It's such a busy job and there's so much going on, but just to feel like we felt at the high school, we felt respected, we felt heard, just to feel like somebody cares about sort of what's going on day to day on the ground.
I love that. I really love that answer. And I'm going to remember that, because I do think it's important. We do often, especially as an elected now, we sometimes always do go to that same person, the person who's either been identified or is self-identified as the speaker for a particular neighborhood or on a particular issue. And that's really an important note, and I think very sound advice for me. Drew, what's yours?
I don't think I can get any better than what Nicole said. I would think after the last 4.5 years we've had as Americans as a whole, we've lost a lot of people to just not believing that their voice matters. So I think for you here in Boston would be make sure that you're one with the people. I think people now are very more voiceful, as we've seen. I think people are willing to reach out if they can to have their voices be heard. And I think the one thing that somebody in your position could do is be willing and open to hear everyone's opinions, not just that selected person. Because let's be honest, every time that one selected person speaks, it's not for the mass majority. It's usually for their opinion. You know what I mean? So if you can get to, have a speech at Roxbury, or have a speech in Dorchester, have a speech in East Boston, where the people could actually come and feel like that is Miss George. That's the woman. She's talking to us. She's not just on a podium on Channel 4 talking to all of Boston. You know what I mean? Be one with the people. And I think it'll change every aspect of what you're trying to do.
Great. I love it. I appreciate that so much. I'm really impressed with how smart and wise you all are. All right, John, last on my list. Advice for me as I take on this new endeavor.
Well, first I'm going to say congratulations.
Thank you.
I don't
Yeah,
think I
salute.
really even
Definitely.
said that yet.
Definitely.
Second off, more importantly, your compassion has always been great to me. You've always, you empathize with us when we were kids and going through things. And I mean, I people don't know this, but you took me under your wing even after I left for school. I kind of, I felt very at rest with you and Doug. Like, you guys were great for me, and people don't know that, and that's just a different relationship, right? And it was more than just a teacher-student relationship. It was like a friendship, and I feel like if you can incorporate that, just that comfortability, right? Just that relationship to a lot of people, and it's tough. I know it's going to be tough. I mean, you can't individualize out there, but
I'm going to try.
Absolutely. And I know you got it, girl. I know you got it. You're going to do it up. But for me, it's just that compassion and bringing unity to the city, bringing everybody, bring the big involvement factor in, and having everybody comfortable being around each other is a big factor for me. And I think you're going to do great.
John, I really appreciate that, and thank you. And I'll make sure Doug hears that too. I really worry about a city divided. I worry about kids feeling divided from one another, not just because of the pandemic, but because of the realities that we're living. And I worry about our society as a whole. And I do think, I believe to my core, I wouldn't want this job, the job I have now or the job I want next. I believe that we can do this. In the city of Boston, we've demonstrated, I think we've expressed that it can be done in a community like East Boston, in a community school like East Boston High School. I know John mentioned Anthony Albano. I wish that Anthony were here for this, because he makes everything better. He knows how to fix things that are broken. He's a special gift. But you all, the three of you, have been a gift to me, and I'm so grateful that you were able to join me this afternoon for a little reunion, a little good conversation. And again, I'm lucky to know the three of you, to have watched you grow a little bit, to certainly witness you as adults, and to hear this conversation about love, and about trust, and about community gives me great hope for our city and for all that we can do together. I'm just now charged with making sure that you can stay here in this city, remain connected to this city, and have all the things you need for you and your families here in this city. So with that, everyone watching at home, thank you for joining us. Drew, Nicole, John, thank you so much for being here with me and for the work that you are all doing. More to come for sure. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.